Hey guys, in this video we're going to be plating exterior and interior walls, which means we're going to be cutting the top and bottom boards and putting our layout for studs, windows, doors, blocks in your walls, sheetrock backing, all of that. We're going to be going over the order of operations that you need to follow every time you plate. And we're going to be going over 2 or 3 different ways of marking out your studs on your individual plates. Now this is one of the biggest skills in framing. You're going to be doing this all the time. So there is many different ways of doing this. Our goal with this video is just to give you the basics, show you what's important and why it's important and how to get that done, no matter how you do it. Okay, so the very first thing you need to understand is the order of operations. Now, no matter how you do your plates, the order of operations is going to be basically the same on every house. So the order of operations, we're going to throw up on the screen here, but you should write it down so you can get to know it. First thing you do is cut your plates. This is your top and bottom board where all the other boards go between. First thing you do is cut those, then you lay them out where they go, and you mark out your windows and your doors. So any openings, because they take up a lot of lumber and you'll build everything around that. So cut your plates, windows and doors. Next thing is all of the random studs that go in your walls. Now these are things like point loads, so where weight comes down through the wall and you need to have boards under there to act like a post, or beam pockets and wall partitions. Basically where you tie your walls together, you want to have sheetrock backing and a place to nail them together. The last thing you want to put in is your studs. Now this is the one that there's tons of different methods on laying out studs, but that's the last thing that comes in, because once you have your windows and your doors and all your posts and all that in, you can lay your studs around that and you can leave them out where you need, because sometimes you don't need studs if there's already a board in the wall at that location. In summary, first thing you do is cut your plates to length. Second thing is windows and doors. Third, wall intersections, point loads, beam pockets. Last thing is laying out your studs, your 16 on center studs. So we're laying out plates on this exterior wall, and the first thing we want to consider when cutting our plates to length is we like to avoid window and door openings. We want to break our plates between windows and doors. It makes things easier for the assembly process. So in this wall, we only have one window down at the far end, which means we can cut our plates anywhere in this section. After you figure out where your windows and doors are, and you have the general idea of where you want to break it between them, the second thing is to break it on stud layout, which stud layout is any of these red marks on the tape measure. They're 16 inches apart. It's just like this ladder truss down here. The studs are laid out at 16 inches. So every red rectangle is a stud. So for all plates, we want to break directly under a stud so that the stud sits on the left and right side. So in this specific scenario, we were able to cut a 16-foot plate exactly. And that breaks directly under a stud down there. So now that we got our plates laid out and cut to the stud, we're going to go ahead and mark out windows and doors. And in this run, we only have one window, so it's super easy. Now we want to go to the print and we want to find our window center. In most cases, we are marking window and door center, and then we are pulling our rough opening out off of that each way. On this house right here, you can see that this window is 3 foot 3 inches off of the outside of this wall here. We're going to hook our tape on the end. We're going to mark 3 foot 3 inches. Now we draw a C through that line. That's going to tell us that that's a window center. That's the only reason the mark is there. So now that we have our window center, we're going to get our rough opening and mark out where our window goes. Now rough openings are very important. You do not want to mess this up, because you're going to have this whole wall built and sheeted so that it is locked in before you install the window. So if you go to install the window and it doesn't fit, it sucks. So a lot of people do this differently, but we always take our rough openings directly off the window order. And that just completely eliminates mistakes from happening. For this particular window, we have a rough opening of 30 by 42. So that's width by height. So we're going to take 30 inches, divide it by 2, which is 15. So we're gonna take our 30-inch wide rough opening and we're gonna split it in half, which is 15. And we're gonna put the 15 on our center mark. Then we know that right here at the end of the tape is the start of our window. So we'll put a jack and a king. Some people call these trimmers, and that is okay. We're gonna go over here to 30, make a mark while we're here at 1.5 and 3 inches past, and that's our jack and our king. Now we'll take our square and square these off. And on these squares, you can see that there's marks here. So this is 1.5 inches and this is 3 inches. So we're gonna line up our 1.5 inches, just this side, so that when we draw our line, it's exactly 1.5 inches past. And we're gonna go here and line it up. You can see how it lines up with the marks we made. Now we'll do the exact same thing on the other side of the window. Line it up, line up, 1.5 inches, 1.5 inches, 3 inches. And there you go. Now sometimes you're gonna need 2 jacks or 2 trimmers, whatever you call them. Sometimes you'll even need 3, but we're gonna include that in a completely different video because there's a lot of thinking and math that goes into that. So now that we got our window marked out, we're gonna go ahead and mark out any point loads, beam pockets, or wall intersections. And in this case, we only have wall intersections. So we're gonna come over here and show you guys how to do that. So right here, we have an interior wall coming into the exterior. So we're gonna need a sheetrock backer on each side, and we're gonna need something to nail it into. Now, depending on how you lay out, these boards may be on the side or spread apart, but either way, you should have chalk lines coming in on each side of this so you know where these walls will be. Now you can just take your square, if this board wasn't here, and trace up, and that will show you where you need to put your sheetrock backing. Now since this is an exterior wall, we don't want to put a 2x6 here and a 2x6 here, because then they wouldn't be able to insulate behind this. Instead, we're going to make an L here, and that allows us to have a sheetrock backer on each side, and they can still fit insulation back behind that. So we're going to move on to the 2x4 wall. So this is a very similar scenario. You still want to do an L so they can insulate, but right here we're going to have a stud that splits this seam. It's going to be 3/4 past this because we're splitting over the seam. So we're just going to throw a 2x6 L on here, and that will allow us to get our sheetrock backing. Normally we shoot for 1.5 inches, but if something's this close, we're fine with a shorter sheetrock backer. About 3/4 is cutting it really close. One more thing I forgot to mention, if there was more windows in this wall, they usually give us center to center of the windows. So you just hold your tape on that C and you pull down. You can set a nail in there to hold your tape or whatever. The important part is that you hold it on the C and go to your next center of your next window. The last thing that we have to put in this wall before laying out studs is this corner piece, which the way we do it is to put a sheetrock backer on the inside and a siding corner backer on the outside. We call these U-blocks because when you nail these boards together and you look at it from the end, it looks like a U. This allows them to still get insulation into that corner even though we have all of our back. So we'll draw it out like this. This is 5.5. So this was a really easy wall. We didn't have any height changes, only had one window. The last thing we need to do is mark our stud layout. We're gonna go to the table and show you the different ways that people mark stud layouts. So we're gonna show you a few different ways that people lay out their studs. And depending on which one you do, it's gonna affect your entire process. So you just pick the best one for you and roll with that. Okay, so there's 2 different ways of marking studs. One is on the side of the boards, and one is on the actual face of the boards. Now there's pros and cons for both of them, but we like to mark out on the side. Before I explain these, I'm gonna show you what 16 on center means and how to deal with it. So right here, we have 3 marks that are each 16 inches apart. They're on our red rectangles. So when we put these boards centered on these marks between center board to center board is 16 inches. That means that when we hook our tape on the outside, they are also 16 inches from outside to inside. That equals a 14.5-inch gap between. So this is how all your studs are laid out, so that when you put your sheeting up, it splits the studs in half, whether it's drywall or OSB. So the tricky part to understand is when you're starting a run, whether you're on an interior wall butting into the exterior, or you're on an exterior corner pulling off that. Because when you put a sheet up there, your sheet needs to be flush with the corner, but it also needs to split a stud in half. So that means if you pull 16, it needs to be to the center. So when we're marking center, it's easy. But it gets tricky when you start marking the side of the stud, because when you're pulling from the end of the plate or the corner, you need to mark 15.25, and that will show you the side of the stud. After that, you can pull 16 and it will continue marking the sides of the studs. When we mark 15.25, we call it a 3/4 inch drop. Whichever one you choose really depends on whether you're marking on the face or the side. If we're marking on the face of the boards and we are laying our plates out, we can't mark center because when we put our studs on, we won't be able to see the line. So if we're starting a run from a corner, we're going to mark 15.25. That means that the center of the stud will be 16 inches from the end. After you make that first mark, everything after that is 16. So the way to mark this out, if your plates are laying face down and you're marking the side, is to look at the 16 and drop 3/4. And you do that on every one. That way, when you transfer your stud marks to the other plate, they're on the side of each of your studs. We put an X here to indicate where the stud goes. Now that's how you mark your plates out on the face. If we're marking out on the side, which is what we like to do, so for marking center, we take our tape, hook it on the end of the wall, and you put your pencil under the tape. And you want to line this arrow up with the tip of your pencil. And you make a mark like that. You just swing your tape across. You go down the line, slide in your hand, you find that rectangle, line up your pencil with the arrow, and swing it. You just go down the line, and it's really quick to mark centers. So marking centers this way, we have our 3/4 inch drop, and we're good to go. Okay, if you're still with me, say that this is a second plate. Just like the one behind me, we cut it at 16 feet. So that means a stud is going to split halfway. Since it's splitting halfway, we can still pull our tape on the next plate and mark centers, and it will keep us on layout. The last way to mark, and my personal favorite, is to mark on the side of the board, but do your 3/4 inch drop. So you hook your tape, and you mark the side of the stud here. You can make a little mark to show where the stud goes. You go to your red rectangle, you go 3/4 inch drop, and mark your studs. Now I'll show you why we do it this way. Okay, now we can lay out our studs on this. Now we chose to pull layout from this corner, not the other corner, because our ladder truss here lines up. This is a little kicked here, but these studs are 16 inches on center, and we want to match those so that it's easy for our sheeting to tie in. So we're going to go across the top here. We're going to make a mark at 15.25 and put an X or a line where our stud goes on the 16. And we're going to go down this plate and make a mark at every red rectangle with a 3/4 drop. So we're marking the left side of the stud from my perspective. And this goes really quick. Don't worry about being perfect on these. You have 3/4 of an inch to hit, with sheeting or drywall. So it's not a big deal if it's an 1/8 off. Here's our plate seam. Now we're going to go back down to the end and mark our studs on the face. We use this square here, and you just set it on top, right in line with your line. And we make a mark on the face here, and that's the edge of our stud. And we take our crayon and make a line for where our stud goes. So we just set it on the edge, make a mark, make a mark. So here we are on the ends of our plates, and we're just going to make an X here, and that shows a little V on each side. And that way when we're building this wall, we know to hang one of these studs halfway over. And that way when we're building this wall, we know to hang one of these studs halfway over when we nail it. We'll leave the stud out of the next wall because when we stand it up, it will already be there. So right here, where our plates break, we can keep pulling layout off of this because this is exactly 16 feet. It's exactly the center of a stud. So when we pull our tape, 16 will be the center of the studs going down. So we just keep marking 15 1/4 to make sure that it's on the side of each stud. You go to the red rectangle, you go back 3/4 and make a mark. Then you put an X. And you just keep going down the rest of your house. So we're going to transition over to interior plates now. And right here, we have 3 plates that we need to do. On this plate, we're going to show you how to mark out on the face, the wide part of the board. On this plate, we're going to show you how to mark out center on the edge of the board. And then on this last plate, we're going to show you again how we're marking out the entire house in this scenario. So on this first plate, we're going to mark out on the face. And we have 2 walls coming in here, and this wall we're going to run long so that we can just butt these walls in later. So you can either pull out your tape, butt into this, line it up on that chalk line, and then get an exact measurement of what this should be, which is 83 7/8. Or you can take some scrap boards, butt them up against the plates so that they're equal on the ends, and then use your square to trace a line where you're going to cut the boards. So we got our boards cut to length. And something I forgot to mention earlier is that when you cut your plates, they need to be exact. Your plates need to be the same length, because if they're not, when you start standing your walls and putting them together, you can get, if your top plate is shorter, you can get it leaning at the end even though your perpendicular wall is plumb. So it's very important that you make sure your plates are cut to the exact same measurement. Anyway, we got our plates here and they're laid down so that the widest part of the board is up. And the first thing we need to do is mark out windows and doors. Since you don't have windows on the interior of the house, we're going to mark out the door here. So for that, keeping your plates flush together, we have a 3/0 door, and we do not have center for this door. So our standard is to bring it in 4.5 inches from the end. That allows for enough room for trim to fit on the side of the door. So in this case, instead of marking center, because they didn't give it to us, we're going to mark our jack, which is 4.5 inches in. Then we have our king and a stud on the end. From our jack, we're going to pull our 3/0 door rough opening. A 3/0 door stands for 3-foot door. You always want to add 2 inches to the door to allow for your rough opening. We're going to make our marks here because our tape's right here. And then making sure your plates are flush on the end, we're going to square across. So now we can pull our studs. And since we're marking on the face, we have to mark the side. So we'll pull from this side. Since we're in the door here, we have a cripple. It's a short board above the header of the door. So we'll put a C there. We have another cripple here. Then we have a stud. Still keeping our 3/4 drop all the way down. And I forgot to put my corner in, my wall intersection. So we're gonna butt it back in where it goes. We have our wall coming in here. So we're gonna take our square, transfer that up. This is where our wall intersection goes. So we're gonna put an L here. It doesn't need to be a U because there's not gonna be anything in this little cavity here other than insulation. So right here, we're gonna have a sheetrock backer. And then right here, we're gonna have an L made so that we can nail this wall into it. Now, this is why I don't like marking on the face, because if you take this wall somewhere else and you build it, you don't know which way to put your L. You might build your wall and it's on the wrong side, and then you don't have anything to nail your wall into. So that is the biggest flaw of marking on the face. Anyway, we're gonna go ahead and square our studs off so that we have our marks on our top and bottom plate. We don't need them for cripples. There's no cripples in the doorway, but we don't know which plate is our top or bottom plate in this scenario. This one should be because of how that L is facing. So yeah, there we have it. Our plates are marked out and this wall is ready to build. So we'll go ahead and get our measurement for the next plate so we can go show you guys marking center of stud on the edge. So we have 76.5. Another thing I forgot to mention is that when you're picking your plates, you want them to be pretty straight boards. You don't want a lot of twist or crown. It makes building the wall and getting a plumb wall very difficult. On a lot of the 16s that we're using on this job, they dive off at the end. If I put a board next to it, you can see that right at the end they dive off a good 1/8 of an inch. So we're making sure not to use that end for our plates. When we plumb our corner off of that, it's going to throw our entire wall an 1/8 inch minimum out of plumb. So yeah, when you're picking plates, pick good boards. So we're back. We got our plates on the side together. We're going to flush them up with our line here, right on our chalk line. And then this wall doesn't have any doors or partition blocks like a T intersection. So we're just going to go ahead and mark our stud layout. So we're marking our stud layout like we showed you before. Hook your tape on the end, put your pencil underneath, right on the 16, line up the tip of your pencil with the arrow, just go back and forth. Find that, make a line. Really quick. You can mark out a 16 in no time at all. Here we have our corner intersection. So we're going to have a stud on the end, and then we're going to have an L here. Again, it's tricky to do it this way because you can put the L on the wrong side and not have anything to have your sheetrock backer. So you have to pay attention to which way you're building the wall when you lay your plates out this way. So this wall is ready to build, all marked out. Next we'll show you the way we're doing it on this job. For this last method here, and the method that we're using to plate out this house, we're going to take our board. It's a scrap piece, it's not cut to length, and we're going to butt it in right where it goes. Now you want to make sure and flush it between the lines, line on each side, and we're going to put a 2 3/8 inch smooth nail in. Then we're going to come down to the other end, line it up on our lines, put a nail in. Now if there was a wall coming into this as an intersection, you would want to put a nail, you would want to flush it up on the chalk line and put a nail right on this intersection so that it's in the right spot. Then we'll take our next plate, our top plate, do the same exact thing, making sure it's flush. Now you want to make sure these ends line up because your plates need to be the same length. If there was a T, we'd put one there. Then we'll flush it up, put a nail down here. Now we'll take our square and we'll trace up where these walls meet. Right on that chalk line there, make a mark. Now we can cut it to length. Now to make this cut, you have to have a saw that's capable of cutting 3 inches because we have 2 plates stacked on top of each other. We kind of modified this saw to make this happen. Okay, you can see that these plates are exactly the same length because they were cut at the same time in the same place. If I was a little bit more focused and I was laying out this wall without a camera, I would have put this one in first, because now I have to measure those plates and cut them outside and then put them in. If I had done them first, then this would have just bumped onto the end and we could have cut it off to cap it. Just like all the other plates, we're gonna lay out doors and wall intersections first. This doesn't have any doors. It does have a corner here, but we don't need a sheetrock backer because this is just an insulation cavity. We're gonna pull our stud layout, dropping 3/4 on each one. So we got 16, go back 3/4, 15 1/4, make a mark. Drop 3/4, make a mark, put your X on. Drop 3/4, make a mark, put your X on. Now we take our square again, just like the exterior, line it up, mark, stud. Now we're just going to show you how to put in L's and T's and doors if you had some, if you're laying out this way. So a door is pretty simple. You make your center mark, pull your door opening, mark your jacks, your kings, and you just transfer down and trace up. For a corner, if we had one coming in here and we actually needed a sheetrock backer, we'd make a line here and a line here. That shows us a corner. If we actually had a corner in this wall and this was butting in, we would mark all our studs on this side because we'd be building it with this side up. Because I'm gonna make a mark here and here. This shows that there needs to be an L on this. Now, the cool part about this method is that since your top plate is full of all your marks, you can actually show how the corner is supposed to go into the wall. So no matter where you build these walls, if you use this as your top plate and you keep it facing out, you just follow these symbols to show where your wall intersections and your corners go. That way, wherever you build it, you can bring it over, put it in the right place, and the corners and the wall intersections will be facing the right way. Here's an example of a T. We're gonna trace our lines here, make our mark on the top. Now we know we have a stud here and a stud here for our sheetrock backer, and we're gonna have a stud here. So that way, when we build this wall, we can look at the top plate and realize which way we need to put our U-block in. The last super cool part about this system is that since you know this is your top plate, you can mark out where your double top plates overlap. So in this example over here, we have a wall coming in, which means our double top plate will have to overlap like this. So we can actually make our mark. We'll go 3 5/8 in. And this is where the plate goes to. For our T, we'd want to go 1/8 inch on each side. So we have 3 3/4. This is where our double top plates would be. Obviously you can get it cleaner. So now when we're building this wall, this is facing out. We can actually put a board right on here and nail it on after all our studs are on. Same thing over here. This plate, this double top plate, would run long. So we can put an arrow here and say 3.5. So we know that this is a 2x4, not a 2x6. So when we build this wall, we just overhang our top plate 3 1/2 inches, nail it on. Okay, behind me here, we have all of our plates, interior and exterior, laid out. They don't have marks yet, but they're all cut to lengths where they should go. So we can go through, mark all of our door openings, our wall intersections, our double top plates, and our studs. And then we can take these walls wherever we have space, build them, and bring them back knowing they're built right. Double top plated already. And when we slide them in, they all lock together. It's great. Right here, we have a change in height. So this wall is about 2 feet taller than this wall. So we'll break our studs here, and we can mark this change in height right on our plate. After you get your whole house marked out, you can just take your plates. Since they're smooth nails, it's very easy to pry these things up. Take your plates nailed together. Be sure to watch out for these. Pull them apart, pound that out, build your wall, bring it back into place. So right here, we have a long run and we have a bunch of walls butting into it. So we want to, when we're cutting our plates to length, we want to keep these walls that are butting into it short so that this plate can just run right through. This is pretty common in houses where you have a bunch of walls and then just an end cap wall. And the easiest way to do that is just to keep the butting in walls short so that you can build this in one run. Okay, so there you have it. There's a lot of different ways to lay out plates, but we hope that you got a lot of value out of this and you can pick which way you like best. The important things to keep in mind are that order of operations. When you cut your plates to length, they have to be the exact same length. Then you mark out windows and doors. Then you mark out wall intersections, point loads, and beam pockets. Last thing you do is come through and mark studs and cripples. There's other ways of laying out plates that we didn't cover in this video, so whatever way you do it, that works for you. The order of operation should stay the same no matter how you mark out plates. Check out our next video about framing exterior walls. And if you guys got any value out of this, subscribe to our channel because we're doing an in-depth video on every skill involved in framing a house. Last thing, if you guys have any questions about this or comments, please comment below because we will be responding.